Right, welcome everybody. Kia ora to this Finance Performance Committee meeting, largely to consider the fees, charges and the annual plan for presentation to the council meeting next week, I think it is. So we have Alistair missing. I haven't heard if he's going to put an apology, so I don't think I can put an apology for him. Jeremy said that he was going to try and join by Zoom, but he hasn't, so we'll take that as an apology, hopefully he can join at some stage. Move Lyndall, seconded by Paul. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Carried. Thank you very much. Any declarations of interest today? We don't have a public forum or a petition or a deputation. The committee resolutions we haven't got those. The next meeting of this committee. Any urgent items? I'm not aware of any of those, or any questions, or in fact any reports on councillors' reports. Okay, all right, we'll go on to the reports and item 9.1. Fees and charges schedule, and Patrick is going to lead us into this so that he can explain some of the things. There have been one or two questions, but I think those have been clarified, partly by me not reading the report properly. Yes, Patrick, please go ahead.
Sorry, Chair. There was a question. I did email you, and I had made a mistake, but I also asked a couple of other questions relating to some information that should have been shared before now.
Oh, okay.
And it was promised to be shared, and we haven't got any finalisation of that.
No, that's right. Did you mean for me to share that with everybody?
Well, that was initially discussed in the previous meeting, where we were told that we were going to be given a summarised data of a breakdown of consent inspection costs. And we asked, I think it was myself and Councillor McPhail, we asked for it in raw form of Hayley, and we have yet to see that. And I would have thought it would have been good to see that before making any finalised decisions. That was my thought at the time, and we were promised we would get that information.
Okay. So can you read out your email to me now? The relevant parts of it anyway.
A number of councillors, including myself, asked for this breakdown information. We've asked for it in raw form. This has not happened. I've not received any of the information around cost breakdowns of consent checks, etc. I would also be concerned if this information has not been shared with the submitter that asked for that breakdown, and this is based on the fact that I have not received the information.
Okay, so that's you're asking for a breakdown of individual task costs, and you say that Hayley verbally presented this, that
yes.
This had been analysed and found these to be correct. We were told we would get a summarised report,
Yes.
but we asked for a full breakdown. I sort of remember that.
Yes.
In fact, we were told it was 27 pages and a lot to evaluate, but I feel like we need to see it.
Yes.
Hayley, can you respond to that, or Patrick?
Maybe start.
Yeah.
I might make a comment as well.
My apologies for not sharing it. I do have that information, and I can share that during the course of this meeting through you, Chair. It's 28 different fees and charges. I suppose they're sheets, so it's not 28 full pages. Each sheet on the spreadsheet, which I have that cost breakdown for, it's not a large piece of data, but it goes into breakdown of the time spent for each type of inspection against the fee charged for that inspection.
Okay, so
in terms, there is the way in which that is broken down. does have officers' names against it, so I'll just need to check in with my colleagues with regards to implications with sharing those officers' names, which I can do so because she's at the back of the meeting here. And so if required, I can just blank those out and then share that data.
So will that be able to be done in good time for our final meeting to approve the annual?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else got any questions about that?
I could make a comment as well. One of the things I was going to touch on in the introductory remarks, I'm relatively new as well, so I didn't see the workings behind the fees and charges schedule.
Yeah.
But I think in talking with Wilma, it would be quite good to review all of the fees and charges and be confident that there's a reliable formula behind each charge that we understand. So I was going to propose that as an exercise as
Yes.
for the coming financial year.
Yeah, it would be good to have a percentage increase based on last year or the previous year, so we know. And with regards to signing off the fees and charges today, the councillors had asked for the information required before that, so that we could sit over and peruse it. I also had part of that question was is that going to be shared with the submitter? Lloyd McCallum, I believe, submitted asking regarding the cost of flyovers of slope and things like that. So will that be shared with submitter?
Through you, Chair, a cost breakdown such that relevant to an individual inspection is quite challenging for us to actually do in a way that is useful.
Yes.
We can obviously share information about how much each aerial flight costs, in the interest of full transparency, as well as the wide variety of work programs that we are actioning when we undertake those aerial inspections. So, for example, our intensive winter grazing aerial inspections started this Monday, with the team covering the western area of Murihiku Southland, but they're not up there just noticing intensive winter grazing compliance and undertaking. They're actually looking at a wide range of activities. So, how that then works is difficult to say. And for you, undertaking this inspection costs this specific thing, but we can share that information about how much each aerial inspection costs with that submitter.
Is that okay?
Thank you, Chair. It was because during discussions we were discussing individual submissions, and at the time I think I remembered saying that some of the responses from staff were similar and maybe considered copy and pasted, and we needed to make sure that we replied to individual submitters with individual concerns. And that was part of that, and that's when we asked for the full data sheet of those costs in relation to what submitter had asked for. The submitter had also proposed or had also made comment that he felt that we were making extra profit on fees and charges. So the fact was to prove or disprove or to supply correct information to the submitter to make sure that we are transparent.
Yeah.
Yes, thank you. Rachel's got her hand up.
Rachel.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to highlight that the responses to submitters on both the rating review and the fees and charges schedule will be coming up to Council at the end of the month when the full annual plan's adopted. So I just wanted to reassure you that those responses have been edited and will be coming back to you.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Paul, and thank you for that, Hayley, as well. Right. So I think it's okay to go on to 9.1 now, the fees and charges schedule. Everybody happy with that? Not Nickel?
I was just going to make a comment or a question on that last issue. I guess it'd be interesting to know when we do the flyovers, is it total cost divided by the number of properties, or if we have to spend more time looking at one, is there any differentiation? Well, on the second thing, I think, we normally try to actually apportion the actual costs, so there shouldn't actually be a profit or a loss, I wouldn't have thought, but there are good things to actually clarify, and we've got one or two submitters who want that information. I think I'm sure that can be done when we actually reply.
Right, thank you. It sounds like that will be provided. Okay, Patrick?
Just some introductory remarks for the fees and charges schedule. The proposed fees and charges schedule for 25-26 is the schedule that was consulted on through April and May 2025, just noting that. The consultation approach and the changes made to the schedule following consultation are included in the papers for information. There are a couple of areas to note. One is that a forecast local government cost index, LGCI, of 3% has been applied to fees and charges to uplift the fees for the inflationary pressure we anticipate we will have. Also of note, the gravel extraction in Table 9 provides an explanation of what the rate, which covers the extraction of gravel, is there to cover, and narrative below the table provides an explanation of when resource consent monitoring charges will be applied. Just noting, Council deliberated on the proposed schedule on 20th of May 2025 and asked that further work be undertaken to investigate introducing a waiver clause relating to royalty charges where this is of significant public good. Noting further, work on the possible waiver clause will occur in 25 and 26, and per the earlier comment, we would also like to progress a more comprehensive review of the full fees and charges schedule to ensure that the charges are up to date, transparent, and continue to reasonably reflect the cost of completing work in the current fiscal climate. And as part of doing that work, it would be helpful for everybody, I think, if formulaically we can see how each charge has been landed on. Those were the introductory comments that I've prepared. And prior to requesting the Council receive the report and adopt the fees and charges schedule, I'd just like to give Rachel the opportunity to make any further comment and then any opportunity for questions and feedback.
Thank you, Patrick. Rachel?
Probably not a lot more to add other than just to clarify for councillors that the waiver clause that some of the submitters presented on at the hearing and we talked about during deliberations, the example that was given was an Environment Canterbury clause, and that sits in a different document to the fees and charges schedule. So in their case, it's in a Riverworks Code of Practice. So as per the item, we will continue to investigate that over the coming year.
Okay, thank you. So I understand that the question that was asked by submitters about having a reduced fee for works that were provided a benefit, either environmental or maybe related to erosion or threatening bridges and that sort of thing, that's dealt with by Environment Canterbury through a different process, a code of practice. And do we have one of those that we could use in the same way?
I think Lucy's in the room and would be best placed to talk to that one.
Thank you.
Sure, Chair, thank you. So the short answer is yes, we do have a code of practice that we use. It's being reviewed in line with a couple of other court processes that are still live, and is also needs to sit neatly alongside our bylaw, which also has elements that manage this activity. So both of which are currently being looked at. The review schedule being put in place to make sure that they're not doubling up on each other, but they're sitting neatly aligned so that they provide clarity for the team, but also for other operators who have these kinds of activities across the bridges.
Okay, thanks. So just further to that, is that something that we could add into the explanation for why we haven't agreed to it in this process?
Again, as Rachel mentioned just before, we can certainly include commentary to that fact in the finalising of the documents prior to coming back to council.
Yeah, that might help. Okay, I've got Paul.
Thank you, Chair.
But in the diary, it's not.
Going back to my email with
It is.
Excuse
you.
me, Paul, sorry, welcome, Alistair.
Welcome, Morris.
Are you all right?
No, I'm definitely not. It's listed in 1:30 in our diary and you've started early.
1:30 on the agenda papers. 1
1
o'clock.
o'clock.
1 o'clock on the agenda paper, but it's 1:30 on the diary. There's
Okay.
too much of this going on.
I think most of us seem to have got that, but welcome anyway. Paul, after you.
Thank you, Chair. With regards to the email I sent, that was also another question with regarding the guidelines of waiving fees. And it's good to see that we have a process in place. And I think you've said that we will work on that over the next year. Because what I've found with processes, if you're going to waive a fee, there's going to be some animosity if people feel that they should get it waived and feel that others are getting it waived. So we need to make sure that we have clear, concise guidelines and processes in place, or else we'll find ourselves in more difficult situations. So I'm really good to hear that we're going to be working on that. Good to hear that we have a process, but we just need to tighten that up. That's my thank you.
Thank you. I'm sure that sounds pretty good to me. Are there any other questions from anybody else, other councillors back on the whole thing now? We're back to that. Thank you, Lucy. Yes.
Because of the problems that have occurred, I need to go back, and I don't know what you've discussed in the last 15 minutes, but we need to go back and get to the bottom of what these fees and charges are made up of, which was actually promised to one of our submitters, and also it was promised to us. So where are we at on that?
Right, well, we've discussed that already, and Hayley has provided an explanation, and that information is going to be provided so that we have plenty of time to look at it for the final meeting when we finally approve these things, which is in next week, I think. Next week, week after.
We have to.
Week after. So that is satisfactory in my book. And those individual submitters that made particular requests, they will get a response from the council which addresses those issues specifically, as far as I can understand. Rachel, is that correct?
Yes, Chair, that is correct.
Right, thank you.
Okay.
Right, thank you. So we are up to item, that was what took up most of the discussion in the last 15 minutes. So now we're up to 9.1, and Patrick has explained. Sorry.
Increase the recommendations.
Oh, we're not quite up to that yet. There might be a few more questions. So we're up to other questions now on the fees and schedule charges. Has anybody got any at all? I have 1 or 2, 4.
Can I just make a comment with regards to the process that we've gone through, the consultation process, the deliberation with submitters prior on the gravel management and also the fees and charges. I would like to say that I've found the process this time to be rather messy, extremely messy. During submissions, we've had tensions, which has grown. We've had submitters contact some councillors without informing them they have submitted by email. Even this week, the same submitter has emailed all councillors asking for a response, even though we're still going through effectively deliberations. And also the information I asked Hayley for. So I feel I would like to make a statement that this has been quite a messy process this year over previous years. I know I'm a first term councillor, but I think it's been very disjointed, and when it comes to submitters personally emailing councillors, then I don't think that's fair as part of the principles of submission, because no other submitters are given the same options. So it's not fair. So we need to make sure when we go through this process again, if we're contacted by submitters in any way, shape or form, whether it be individuals, that we don't reply to them. That we allow them to have their 5 minutes or whatever of submissions, as everyone does, so that it's a fair process, so they don't get a double dip. Thank you.
Yeah. Anybody else like to comment on that or anything else? Yes?
Just a brief comment. I'm not sure that's been any more messy than usual, councillor, but to your point about during the deliberations process and in the consultation process, we have to be very mindful of who and when. So to that point, yes, I would agree. But I'm not sure that it's been any more messy than usual. It's just because we've taken them in semi-isolation this time, it may have appeared that way. So just there's a process we have to follow.
Yes, it's quite a complex process, and it's a bit hard to keep up sometimes. I find that anyway. It's very complex, and once I've understood that, read the tables correctly, and got a note from Phil about the increases and the explanation from Patrick, I'm satisfied that those fees and charges increases are reasonable, in line with inflation, so I'm not concerned about that. One thing that I did have a question about, though, is on page 6, and that is the staff services and hourly rates on table 1. These seem to be very high. I had a look at what Environment Canterbury does, and their charges are, they didn't have exactly the same staff type, but it was sort of similar, and they were roughly about $100 less per hour for a similar staff member that I could tell, and that may be incorrect, but they did seem to be a bit less. And I just wonder how we can justify what is the formula for working this out. It's not that well explained as far as I can tell. Certainly it's much more than what I imagine the annual salary would be for each of these ones. So could we have an explanation, please, for the costs on a per hour basis?
Can I comment on that?
Sure.
Look, just a brief comment. Happy to take an action and determine how those rates can be evaluated. Looking at those hourly rates, if you multiply them by 2,080 available hours a year for an employee, to your point, they cover more than just salary.
Yeah.
I did receive a brief explanation from the CFO, who can't be here today, to say that overhead is covered in the rate, but I need to follow that through and advise you what the formula is that sits behind these numbers.
I think that would be useful, and it would be useful to have that explanation in here for somebody who reads it, because it does seem to be quite high. Nicole?
Yes, well, just listening to that conversation with Canterbury, a lot of those backroom costs with 1,000 employees are probably lower. But it would actually be good for some of these to have a baseline cost to do a certain thing. And okay, we want to charge what it costs, but if some people are taking longer to do the same thing, we need to check and balance just to make sure it's fair. But at the end of the day, we should be, if it's for a consent, whatever else, the rest of the community shouldn't be subsidising it. So it should be transparent, and the actual cost needs to go to against the recipient of whatever charge it needs to go. But good to have some checks and balances so that we can actually answer these questions in a transparent way and say that this consent, normally if you've got all the information, it takes X number of hours, etc. If it takes a lot longer, there should be an explanation as to why you didn't provide all the information, or we had to do more work. But I think that's sort of transparency. But overall, I've sort of had a look at the charges, and then on that principle of basically the user pays. I think some of them do vary, but if that's the cost, that's the cost. If we can make efficiencies, that's great too.
Just before we leave that, I'll come to you after. Sorry. on page 28 or page 42, the standard staff time, it says, for providing information under the Local Government Official Information and Meetings Act is $39 per half hour. And then for specialists, it's at cost. So there seems to be a discrepancy there, and that $39 seems to be pretty low, I would have thought, but maybe there's a good explanation of that as well. I'm sure there will be. All right, Alistair, what's your question?
Probably more a comment, but there will be a
Well,
question.
before you start, Alistair, just be wary that your comments must not be personal, must be general in nature, and not criticise any individual.
What I want to know, Morris, how do we get our ratepayers to be convinced as much as you are in relation to accepting our fees and charges? Because there is a fair pushback out there at the moment that they're far too high for what they're getting. Now, so you tell me, you've got yourself to the point of accepting it. Can you put that through comms and put it out to our ratepayers, please?
Well, if I may interpret what's happened already at this meeting is that that explanation will be provided. And also Patrick mentioned that there will be a review of this whole process so that we can see exactly the things that you're asking for. Probably won't be available for this year, but because it's a fairly big exercise, but that is something that is happening.
I think the other point I want to question and get an answer on, where we've got these large breaches that actually end up in the court, do we recover our costs, or does the ratepayer actually pay some of those costs too?
Lucy, can you answer that? or Hayley, about the costs of, did you hear the question?
And to the judges and what they give us.
That's not a problem.
Councillor McPhail was indicating, just so you know, Chair, when
through your chair, just to be clear on the question, you're saying about breaches in court. Do you mean when people have had non-compliance
Well,
situations
as I
and then we take them to court?
As I understand it, the fine is such that we get a portion of it, but that doesn't often cover our costs.
Yes, through you, Chair, we always seek to try and recover our costs, obviously, absolutely, out of any enforcement process. But unfortunately, particularly when it gets to court, the costs, the fine that is awarded to us, which is done through a process through the Ministry of Justice, often doesn't cover our costs, unfortunately. And so in those instances, yes, the ratepayer unfortunately suffers that consequence.
Is that fair?
Through you, Chair, I don't think that's fair either. I think that when enforcement action is successful, absolutely the polluter should pay.
Okay, thank you, Hayley. Lyndall.
Yeah, just a clarification of the recommendations, Chairman. We are, number 2 is to approve the fees and charges schedule for adoption at the next council meeting, correct? So we're not actually approving the fees and charges schedule here. We're recommending it go to council the way it is, right?
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. So there's still room for debate.
But we've got considerably more information to come before that.
Yes, there is going to be more information. And there's one other question that I have about the gravel on page 19 of the report. Table 9. You did talk about this before, I think it was Lucy. But I read through this and it doesn't really sound that convincing, I have to say. The submitters saw this as, their words, double dipping. And I think we need a better explanation about this. That's just my opinion. Others might have found it to be okay, but it still seems to me that the different amounts of money are really for the same thing. Can it be explained a bit better?
Yeah, so through you, Chair, one of the things that we have been working on over the last few weeks since the submitters were heard was to kind of start to unpack what that double dipping concern had been. What we have discovered is that there's a number of different places in the organisation that's doing work on this topic. So my team provides technical advice and support to people who are interested in getting consents for these kinds of activities. That is normally at our cost. We normally would be supporting people for those kinds of activities, partially funded by the royalties, but not entirely. And there's obviously then the work that the consents and compliance team do as well in terms of monitoring. And then there's the third part of the puzzle, which is all about kind of anticipatory intel and flood information work. So one of the reasons why we're recommending that we don't kind of go too quick and say yes or no to any kind of this was a levy kind of wording exactly, was that we need to really be clear about where the costs are currently lying and how do we make sure that we are taking a standardised approach across the whole. So I think Rachel mentioned before, we can definitely bolster the wording and make it even clearer, but that's one of the reasons why, as per my answer earlier, that we're undertaking this review of all of our current ways that we're managing this activity to make sure that the fees and charges should be at the kind of the end as opposed to the beginning. It shouldn't be leading the whole prioritisation. So it's a bit of a string we have now pulled, and we know a bunch more than we did before, but the problem needs more work to actually come up with a nuanced solution. That was a bit of a rambly answer, I apologise, but it's a fairly complicated thing we're uncovering.
Yeah, okay. No, well, that's good, thanks. I'm just, I don't want to have to meet these people on the street one day and they say, you didn't really make much difference to what we said. I'd like with their submission to have made a difference.
I think it definitely will, and I think we should be really clear about how and when and where we will be coming back with more information through the year to make sure that it's clear where they'll have opportunity to hear more. Certainly elements like the bylaw review and the code of practice review will be seeking submissions on, and so there'll be opportunities for the community more broadly to input there as well. And then for next year, the fees and charges can then reflect those decisions and direction.
Right, thank you, and thanks committee members.
Jeremy, I think's been waiting patiently.
Oh, Jeremy, I'm sorry, I saw you, but I didn't see your hand up.
Yeah, sorry, you can hear me all right?
Yeah.
Yeah, no worries. My apologies for the 15 minutes just dealing with the family situation, and hopefully I'll be here for the next half an hour. Just quickly, I didn't hear the first 15 minutes, so I don't know if this has been asked. I take it may have been just in regards to replying to submissions. Is that around fees? Is that being talked about? I take it Paul's nodding his head, I see.
Yes.
So around Councillor McCallum, not Councillor McCallum, Mr. McCallum, as I should get that title right. So yeah, just answering some of those questions, and as I say, I've got a conflict of interest in all this discussion, so I won't be voting or anything anyway in regards to consents. But it is just needs clarity to make sure the questions have been answered. And I think Hayley was going to send some detail through on some of those breakdowns. I think we have discussed that, a full breakdown, and just want to clarify that, please.
Yeah, we talked about that, Jeremy,
Yeah.
right at the start of the meeting, and Paul brought that up, and Alistair reminded us of it as well. So yes, that's certainly on the agenda. Thank you. Right, I think we'll probably now go back to the report where it says recommendation, and we've got two recommendations there, and the second recommendation is the wording that has to be changed. Can you remind me, Councillor Ludlow, what that should be?
Well, I wonder if we just leave it as it is, because we're recommending it for adoption, but with further information to support. that when it comes up, but I don't know whether that needs to be in the recommendation or not.
I think you could put, subject to the discussions today or something like that.
Yeah, or subject to further information coming.
Right. Subject to further information as requested.
I'm happy to move that then, I think.
It should say that for adoption at the
Full council.
meeting. Yeah. Subject to further information as requested. Right, thank you very much. Somebody like to move that, please. Councillor Ludlow and seconder.
I'll second.
Chairman Nicole Horrell. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against. Right, thank you very much. Yeah, long-term plan. Next item, so next item is on page 64. Alistair, you're right there.
No, I'm quite irate.
Oh, well, shall we have Patrick's explanation first, and then
Thank
if
you.
you have a question, please ask that. Okay.
And once again, just want to make some introductory remarks to assist answering questions. So there's a little bit to cover here, but what I've done is I've split it out into key parts of the report. There are a couple of key items to note that impact on the statement of revenue and expenditure when annual plan is compared to the long-term plan. So just want to touch on those first. So the first point to note is that in terms of the changes between long-term plan and annual plan, rates income decreases by $1.2 million. And that's in line with our stated intention to reduce the annual rate increase from 12.9% to 8.8%. The second item of note is that the capital grants revenue of $4.2 million for flood resilience work was not anticipated in the long-term plan, but has been confirmed in the annual plan. And it should be noted that whilst that increases our surplus from $0.3 million to $3.9 million, it's only available for us to spend on flood resilience work and cannot be applied to normal operating expenditure. And then the remaining comment on revenue and expenditure, you will see that our other expenses have decreased by $0.9 million. This is driven by a change to our long-term debt assumptions and therefore the interest payments that we need to make of $0.6 million. And that's enabled us to reduce the amount of saving that's had to be achieved elsewhere to fund that rate reduction. So those are the key points of note on revenue and expenditure. Just some comments next on net debt. So the net debt comprises of our cash and cash equivalents minus our term deposits, our term debt, and they are found on the prospective statement of financial position, which is either on page 15 or 71, depending on whether you're looking at the plan or the pack. We have confirmed government grant funding, and there is some timing associated with capital work, and that means a significant reduction in the amount of debt we will need to incur compared to what had been planned for. There is a separate paper that we will cover off on after we've attended to the annual plan, where we are proposing to you to reduce the amount of long-term debt that we incur. So those are some comments on debt. And then just some final remarks or further comments. So First comment, in the recommendations, there's a request to fund 215K of Thriving Southland work in 25-26. It's proposed that this is funded from the catchment integration accumulated reserve. And just for your information, that has an opening balance of $1.6 million. That funding is built into the assumptions that are in this draft annual plan. Sam's not able to be here to talk to the funding request, but he does advise that Thriving Southland work is generating significant value, and it is our recommendation to support this funding. It's also worth noting that our forecast closing position for our reserves, found on page 18 of the plan or page 74 of the pack, has $30 million. The $30 million of our reserves are more than covered by the JB Were investment, which has a planned value of $33.6 million. So I just wanted to note that our reserves are entirely cash backed, which I think is important. And it is also worth noting that there's an assumption in the annual plan that to assist in funding the rates reduction from 12.9 to 8.8%, that 0.6 million of the JB Were fund balance was to be converted to cash and used to fund operating expenses. Based on the assumptions in the plan, this still leaves us with full cash backing of our reserves. And I thought it was just important to note that as well. So prior to moving on to any questions and consideration of the recommendations, if we could just give Rachel an opportunity to comment further on movement between long-term plan and annual plan, that would be great.
Right, thank you, Patrick. Yes, Rachel.
Thank you, Chair. So perhaps just before I do that, to note, obviously we ran a formal consultation process regarding the river management rate, and the decision on that has implications for the annual plan, but doesn't obviously affect the overall amount of funding sought for the river management activity, but just changes the distribution of where the funding comes from across the region. Alongside that formal consultation process on the rating review, we did put out the opportunity for people to provide informal feedback on the annual plan, and some submitters did comment on the 8.8% at the hearing. There was also some written feedback, basically just a couple of statements from folk, from 4 people to be precise, who just commented on the size of the rate increase, noting it was higher than the rate of inflation. And there was also somebody who raised some concerns about their individual rates, and upon investigation, most of their rates were actually Southland District Council rates, and therefore outside of our control. So just drawing your attention to that feedback. In terms of the differences between the long-term plan and the annual plan. So the long-term plan obviously had an average rates increase of 12.9%, which has been reduced to 8%. And Patrick's talked through some of the variables there. There is a table on page 52 that we're very happy to answer any questions on. So I'll probably just leave it there. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Right, any questions from anybody? Alistair.
It just so happened that I got some time to listen to the radio the other day, and we were reported as having a $1.5 million profit. Is that right?
I believe that's the forecast surplus for the year.
No, for the year ending that we've just finished, I think. Is that what
that
it
we're
was?
about to finish on June 30.
Yeah. Now, I have tremendous difficulty with that, because what the people see, $1.5 million isn't that large for our turnover in here, but it is to them out there trying to make ends meet. So can we get that a bit more accurate, or explain it better, that there's reserves and or money coming in there that is for something else, or, you know, because we don't want to have profits.
I think, Patrick, Thank you. I think that it's always difficult to explain things to people when they don't see all the detail of everything. And I think that's our job. I think when we get asked questions is to do that. I'm not sure if any further, I might be wrong here, Patrick, further explanation. If we read through the whole thing, you know, you'll see the up, unders and overs and how we go into debt for part of the year and then we come out again, depending on when the money comes in and all of that. I'm not sure we could do a better job than we do, but others might have a different view on that. Nicole.
So I think when we do the annual report, there's the opportunity there to actually show clearly where the overs and unders were, and we know that the unrealised gains from our short share portfolio go up and down, but actually we had some, from memory, we did have some savings, but we also we spent a bit less than we thought we would. And it is actually quite good news. We need to couch it that way. If it's that tight, I mean, you look at it as a proportion of the 50-odd million, we're actually pretty close. If we made a 1.5 million loss, you're actually on the back foot going into this process. So I think, Alistair, it's more a matter of explaining. It's actually good news that we make a small profit. If it was a massive profit, people could actually question. But it's not hard to say, well, we were down on cruise ship money, but we saved money here. Our interest rate revenue was slightly higher, and you can quantify it quite easily.
But we don't.
I've got other questions. We'll deal with this one first.
Yeah, okay. I've got Phil and Patrick, do you want to say something first?
Well, I was just going to observe, we've got to be a little bit careful with the language. I'll just wait until the talking's finished. I'm just going to observe, we've got to be a little bit careful with the language you use because we are not for-profit organisation. So using language which reflects a slightly different outcome, we've got to be careful that, you know, things like a revenue surplus or, you know, making sure that the terminology we're using is reflective of our organisational mission and purpose. And the fact that a stock take of your financial position at a particular point in the year, as I say, speaks to that issue of overs and unders, and, you know, the fact that, you know, what variance is it against what you expected you would be delivering? You know, is it a significantly way off, or is it, you know, close to what you expected to deliver? That's an important part of it. But this is not for profit. It's not like we are then sharing the dividends with, you know, shareholders of the organisation as a result of that. That's if it is a resource that's surplus, then it's available for the council to do further work that supports the mission of the organisation.
Thanks, Phil. I think we've got Paul and then Al, we've had, yep.
Thank you, Chair, through you, Chair. Just looking through the recommendations, I can see clearly 1, 2, 3. 4 is recommending the council adopt the annual plan. That's not to proceed with this small committee adopting the rates increase, obviously, but just to adopt the annual plan so it can move forward. Personally, I believe we have a very long history over the last few decades where we're well above the inflation curve with regards to increases in rates. And I've made mention on it on quite a number of occasions. And I'm sure I've moved a motion once or maybe twice without seconding. But we always seem to be asking for more. The word there is always. And we're always above the inflation curve. The word there is always. And our ratepayers are always asking for better from us. And the word there is always. But I think operationally we need to start looking at ourselves seriously. I've called for this before, and I really think we need, if we're looking at amalgamation with 4 councils, with 3 councils or 2 councils to try and save money, as I've said before, no council in the Southern region has been able to save 1 dime, and we haven't been able to give any savings back to our ratepayers. All we've done is ask for more and more and more. And I believe we really need to start acting on this before it turns around and bites us. So I like the idea that inflation is going down, but our rates increases aren't. And that's what's really scary. The gap between our inflation going down and our rates increase, we're trying to pull that down, is widening. So I think I'm happy to make a motion for the recommendations moving forward, but with cautionary note from everything that I've just said.
Thank you, Paul. I'm not quite ready to make a recommendation. I've got Jeremy, but I think I've got Alistair and Nicole as well. Al, you want to say something else?
It's quite simple with that $1.5 million. Is that, okay, there's bits that it'll go into for capital works or whatever it is. But that 1.5, if you said to the public, that goes into hold our rates next year. They don't know where that 1.5 million goes. And to them, it's a big figure. So that's how I would look at dealing with it.
Okay, thank you. Nicole, did you have something else?
Well, a couple of things just on that, the comment about being above the inflation rate. Actually, our business as usual is about 3.5, which is actually pretty close. A lot of the extra is actually in the flood resilience funding that we have to pay back. And I've had the conversation when the Minister of Local Government talked to the Mayoral Forum, and when government would be talking about trying to put a cap on it. And the argument I was making was, for business as usual, we probably live with that. But if there's a clear reason to be doing extra, you need to be able to allow that, otherwise the work doesn't get done. But the other thing I was just wanting a few bit more clarity on is the extra funding for Thriving, and I'm very supportive of Thriving, but I get worried when we're suddenly looking at core funding. I'd like to see a breakdown of what money is being given by MPI, and I think we need to have a wee bit of a value proposition that we're actually going to get value for money on that, because once you start doing core funding, is this an ongoing cost? We put money in last year, particularly for wetland development, which and that was trying to leverage the resources of both organisations, which I'm totally in support of. But just looking at the date on that letter, it's only come in early June, so something's obviously changed. And I'd like, before we make the final decision, to have a little bit more information on that.
So what particular thing would you like? Is that a separate recommendation?
Yes.
Thriving.
Yeah.
Well, I guess it's a separate recommendation.
Three.
And it's sort of, it does seem to have come out of left field a wee bit, and I look at the date on that that letter, which is 3rd of the 6th. So it is coming quite recently. It's just, not saying I'm against it, but it has come in left field. I think we all need a little bit more information as to why this has happened. Is MPI not funding the amount that they were expecting even a few weeks ago? They're doing a great job in leveraging what they're doing. I think it's really important, but it's just some questions I need to answer.
Can I propose that we turn that into an action to write your brief paper?
Right, excellent.
Jeremy, I know you're there waiting. This impact. So, excuse me, Al. Excuse me, councillors. We have just one conversation, please. Do we need to make a separate recommendation on that to be actioned at this meeting, or is that a recommendation to the council meeting on regards to Thriving Southland?
Well, it looks like it's been noted, but I think it's information we need to get before that full council meeting.
Before the full council
So
meeting.
it's whether we need to change the recommendation or whether staff have got enough direction. That's
Okay. Right. Jeremy?
Yeah, just quickly, I'm going to probably have to head away soon. Just to clarify, and Phil probably stole my thunder here in regards to, we're not profit. Profit's the word, wrong word to be using here. Surpluses is probably a better one, but especially from a public point of view. But it is what we do with that funding, and this is always a problem with when we have surpluses, and it could equate to 5% of the rate increase, say, with 1.5 million if it was 30 million. So it's always a hard one to work through, but it's actually us as management and working with governance to say, well, where does that put us for rates next year? How does that reflect if we carry that over? But explaining that will be it'll be good to really explain all that. Certainly agree, and the other thing is with that Thrive in Southland, it sort of come out left field, I thought, a wee bit, but certainly support it. I know, sorry. We all good? Oh, no, it's all good.
I'm just indicating.
Okay. There will be some, and I know there might be one councillor around the table will be indicating why we're funding Thrive in Southland in regards to where that money goes, but a bit more information on that would be good. So, and I might leave you with that. Thank you.
Thanks, Jeremy. Rachel, do you have a response to that in particular?
Thank you, Chair. I just thought I would remind Council that during the long-term plan, because of ongoing funding uncertainty, Thriving Southland did actually lodge 2 requests, and one of them Council granted obviously last year, which was the one-off of 235,000 for on-the-ground action, which is going towards wetland improvements and the like. They had at that time signalled that they would potentially be needing some support with core funding. I do understand that MPI have been down in the last wee while, and in the 2-pager there is some information on figures which we can go back and get more information on, as Patrick noted, but that just says basically their core funding was 1.8 million and that's been decreased to 1.2 million, and so that is why they are seeking some additional funds from us.
Thank you for that explanation, Rachel. Lyndall.
Yes, thanks, Chairman. I was just going to make that point that Rachel's made. In fact, on page 53 of our agenda, there are 2 items there, and one of them is the fact that some of it was deferred to this annual plan from the LTP discussion. So it's not entirely left field, I'd have to say. The other thing, though, is that to Chairman Horrell's point about us being core funders, the magic of Thriving Southland in the past has been that it's been at a distance from our funding and our operations, and that's why it's, in my view, been so successful, because the communities that they deal with, they haven't seen it as a council initiative per se. So I think we maybe need to be a bit mindful of that when we are perhaps contributing to core funding. It could well be misinterpreted as a council offshoot, and we wouldn't want that.
Thank you. Yes, that's a very good point. Right, anything else before we go to the recommendation? No?
Do we need to move and second to change to number 3?
All right, let's look at those. So we've got to receive the report, pretty straightforward. Prepared on our reasonable judgment, assumptions, etc. That's pretty reasonable. Number 3, that's the Thriving Southland one. So has anybody got any suggestions that what we do about that? Do we take it out at the stage and wait until the council meeting, or what, Lyndall?
I think, again, it's a recommendation to take to full council. So maybe we deal with that one separately from the others, and we would maybe need to decide whether we were agreeing in principle to that funding for council to consider it later.
Maybe if we can amend it slightly, then we can include it with everything.
Yeah.
What would you like?
Well, I would do recommendations 1 and 2, and then 3 separately and 4 separately.
Okay.
Just to keep it tidy.
Everybody happy with that? 1 and 2?
Yes.
Would you like to move that, Councillor Ludlow?
Yes, certainly.
Seconder, Councillor Morrison. Thank you, Paul. We've got moved and seconded for recommendations 1 and 2. Please say aye.
Aye.
Against? Carried. Right, recommendation number 3. How are we going to deal with that?
Can I just perhaps clarify, because Nicole spoke to the need for that some additional information might be helpful. And can I just clarify, Like, were you asking for the additional information you thought would be helpful? Was that either where else is the funding coming from? What are their other sources of revenue? Or were you asking, and as well as, were you asking for some sense of how do we evaluate the impact that environment south, that thriving Southland is delivering for our catchments?
Just answering that, I'd sort of written down agreeing in principle that maybe any extra funding we don't call core. But so I think it's agree in principle, but wanting further information before we make that final decision. So I think we're very supportive of thriving Southland, but there's just the odd fish hook there I think we need to be clear of.
So I just wanted to clarify, what was the additional information that you felt would be most useful?
Well, for a start, it sounds like we might have got it. It sounds like MPI have cut their funding by 600,000, which it's an issue. It's something I've got to beef with because of that they're reducing it, and now the implication is that we pick it up, and that's not quite the. And to add to Lyndall's point, we actually don't want to be seen to the public as a major funder because the fact that this is Roundup catchment group supportive, but I do see some political ramifications in there as well as the financial one. So I think we just need all the information before we make that final decision. They're doing good work. It's just how that lands, I guess, from my point of view.
Can I propose, and to your point, in the paper, we outlined to you why we need to fund it with operating expenditure and why it's of value. That those seem to be the key pieces of information that you need.
Is that right?
Yeah, and that would mean we don't need to change the recommendation, is that correct?
I think you could accept the recommendation if you were comfortable with the information in the paper.
I am.
I sort of do get where Chairman Harrell's coming from with regards to this, because ultimately at the end of the day, what he's asking is more clarity of our spending as an organisation. And if it's a lump sum, we need to know that money is being spent to, as we quite rightly say, they're doing a good job on our behalf. We need to make sure that is actually happening. So it would be good to know what the breakdown is and what they're planning on doing with the money. And if there are other issues that they're struggling with, which is a reduction in funding from MPI, then we don't want to leave ourselves in a position where we're funding Thriving South, trying to achieve something that's outside of what we want and is against what we want. And what Chairman Harrell is asking for is very similar to what our ratepayers ask of us. There's some clarity and make sure that we're spending the money right. So we're just going to, can we just say there, can we see what your plan is? Their annual plan and where they're going to be spending the money. Because I know there has been a case where we've felt Thriving South had gone against us and once before. So we just need to make sure that we are funding a partner.
Yeah, thank you. I think the Thriving Southland has an excellent website, and you can see all the work they're doing there. It's a tremendous amount of work. But I think the point that Councillor Lolo makes is an important one, is that it has to remain a farmer-driven, ground-up type of organisation. And if they're getting a lot of basic funding from Environment Southland, then there is the risk that people will, see that as not being that. So I think that's an important point that we want to keep in mind. So, given everybody's input, Councillor Morrison, you look like you might like to say something.
Perhaps just add one other perspective, and that is, as a urban ratepayer, we're subsidising a response which offsets largely industry-centric externalities in the rural setting. I'm also paying a portion of that, offsetting that through my central government taxpayer monies that are going to Thriving Southland from MPI. So, and I'm paying for it twice as an urban one, but I'm arguably not contributing to the rural externalities that are delivering the challenges to our waterways. So there is a perspective from some that, you know, to what degree is it appropriate to be funding or supporting this when it's actually, you might argue, industry might want to step up and take greater ownership of sustaining this in the longer term. I guess on that basis, you know, I'm happy to support this year, but I would certainly be wanting to see greater data in the future as to, you know, what Thriving South and senses is the impact they're delivering, and why is it that, you know, the taxpayer and the ratepayer is the one who should be footing that bill on behalf of what might be argued by some as an industry issue.
Thank you. I think when we do reply to them, that those words and the views of the councillors around the table are hopefully can be incorporated into that response. So number 3 is to recommend the council agree to providing a contribution rather than not agree. Is that right? Yes. Okay. Would someone like to move that we agree to provide a contribution?
I can move it.
Thank you, Paul, and seconded by an urban councillor. That would be good. Councillor Ludlow.
Am I not an urban?
Chicken.
Oh, I know you live in town. Right, all those in favour of that, we agree to do that, please say aye.
Aye.
Against?
Yep. We're
Right.
against.
Number 4.
Alistair's against it.
No, there's 2 of us against.
Are we? Sorry.
I'm sort of not totally comfortable either. I think we could pass it in principle pending further information. I think it is actually a better reflection of the conversation we've had, because if we just pass it, it's a done deal. So there's no pressure on anybody to give us any information.
Yeah, we do have 4 in favour and 2 against, so I think that,
I'm against it. mate.
yeah, okay. 2, Alistair, were you against it as well?
Yes, I am.
Right. So what it is passed, but I think that we've taken on board the conversation, and that will be communicated, and Patrick has undertaken to do an analysis of it as well. So. Right, item number 4, recommend that council adopt the annual plan for the 25-26 year. Somebody like to move that, please? Councillor Morrison, seconded by Councillor Horrell. Chairman Horrell, all those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against? Against, thank you very much. Right.
Excuse me, Chair.
Yes.
Sorry to, is it possible for you to go back with what Phil said with relation to funding? Because it was quite clear. Phil was mentioning about funding from NPI as in our central government tax. So if you can share that with
I think that will hopefully come through in the final regulation at the council.
yeah, that would be good.
Right, let's go to 9.3, long-term debt. This is a paper by Patrick, who referred to this just a little bit earlier. And so perhaps, Patrick, could you remind us again, Alison might have missed that, and Jeremy's not there anymore, but it'd be good for you to remind us why this is necessary.
Yes, I've prepared some introductory remarks to hopefully help you with the recommendations. So just giving you a little bit of history that's led to the recommendations that we're making. So according to our April cash flow forecast, if we proceed with what had previously been planned, whereby we borrow $13.2 million of funding from the LGFA in June of this year, we would end up with a $9.1 million cash surplus by July of 2026. And we'd find ourselves in the slightly unusual position of having borrowed fairly significantly and having a fairly significant cash balance that we then need to find somewhere to invest in order to get an adequate return on those funds. It's worth noting that because we don't account for withholding tax on our term deposits, and because the ANZ term deposit rate at times does compare favourably with the LGFA interest rates on loans, it is only modestly more expensive to borrow and then invest. and to maintain an overdraft facility from June to October. But this essentially amounts to a bit of speculative behaviour because these interest rates do move regularly. So to avoid borrowing and then having to invest the proceeds, what we've done is we've developed a sensitivity model which is included in the appendix to the paper, just to show you what the likely cash position would be at the end of the year for different levels of borrowing. And what we'd like to propose to you is, rather than borrow $13.2 million as originally planned, we would like to reduce that to $7 million and maintain our overdraft facility between June and October when we need it because of the cyclical nature of our cash flows. And that would leave us with a much smaller forecast cash position, positive cash position by July of 2026. So we feel that borrowing a reduced amount of $7 million and maintaining our overdraft in the months we need it is the right approach to take. Also worth noting that we've spoken with ANZ and beyond October, when we believe we won't need an overdraft, we can actually take the overdraft facility away, and that saves us. It's only a small saving, but it means that we don't have to pay the line charge on the facility, so that's also something we are able to do. So if you roll all of that up, our overall recommendations are reduce our borrowing from $13.2 million, which is what was planned, to $7 million, maintain our overdraft facility, establish the borrowing facility with the LGFA, and I think that's really what we're looking for your approval on.
Thank you, Patrick. Fairly complex for us non-accountants, but it sounds to me like it's a good move and might be easier for us to explain to our ratepayers at the end of the year why we haven't got such a big surplus. Paul?
Not to say that I'm an accountant, but I need to understand this a wee bit more in depth. By borrowing 13.2 and having a surplus of 9, does that mean we're not going to spend what we planned on borrowing because our projects aren't ready to go? And if that's the case, do we need to even borrow 7? Do we not borrow as we proceed? So then we're not having money sitting around and then trying to reduce the interest and bank.
I'll break down the answer into a few components. So we've got grant revenue that we hadn't anticipated in our planning, which means that we don't need to borrow as much as we thought we did. Some of the capital projects haven't happened as quickly as planned, so to your point, that's having an impact. But according to our cash flow forecast, we do need some borrowings in order to end the position relatively neutral in terms of how much cash we're holding. So we have had projects in the recent past, like the Stead Street pump station, where we've funded those pieces of work. It's added to our overdraft, and our forecast of our cash flow says that there is borrowing required. We're just proposing borrowing at a lower level.
And supplementary. So we are unable to get that funding until we spend some money, obviously. We can't just use their money and then borrow as we.
So you mean the grant revenue?
Yes.
The grant revenue is going forward, I think, and Jodie, maybe you can help me answer this question, but I think it's project by project in terms of how it's funded. So we need to contribute 40% of the capital project works in order to access the grant money, is generally how it works.
So thank you. So getting back to that last portion of my question was, are we not ready? Do we not have these projects ready to go? Because it's been kicking around the building for a wee while now.
Okay, so Lucy can
It'd be
help
good
me
to
answer.
have some idea on where we're ready to hit the road running.
You through your chair, just to be clear, talking about the grant projects that relate to the flood banks, etc. in Margaret. So as Patrick's stated, the money that we received in September was not entirely anticipated. So elements of and big chunk of it is for 3 years. So the work for the Oddity specifically spans the next 2 construction seasons. So we've spent the last couple of months getting ourselves ready to make sure that the works can start to happen in the next low season. So as Patrick said, once those works are undertaken, we then seek reimbursement for the 60% split. For the 2 other pieces, for the Tiana work and the Aparima work's been already completed this year, this construction year, this financial year. And so the 40%, 60% split has already been put through the books. And so where there's been government grant funding come through, that's been factored in. So that work's already done. And then the Tiana works half started, due to be completed in the next construction season, but the Oddity is larger value and was not anticipated. So we've got to make sure that we're appropriately planning and doing the correct procurement and health and safety necessary pieces as well.
So that first project that's been completed on the Aparima, do we get any debt? Do we go into debt to pay a 40% on it?
So the
I think the capital works is added to the current situation that we have,
Okay.
which is overdraft.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you,
you,
Paul. Jodie, has that all been adequately explained? Yes, thank you, Lucy, that's very good. All right, any other questions about this?
Well, I'm happy to move the recommendation, Mr. Chairman. I think this is a smart way of doing things. We get a concessional rate for that funding, which means that if we've got some surplus, we can actually fund your overdraft at times. So it's and it's saving some extra costs. So we've got great part of our staff have looked at all the options and are happy to vote move the recommendation.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Anybody like to second that? Councillor Ludlow, all right. All those, so we've got 3 some recommendations there, all agreeing to them together. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay, thank you very much, and thank you for that, Patrick. That does sound very sensible. Right, I think that's about it. We've got no ordinary urgent business, public excluded business. So that is the end of the meeting. Before I finish though, perhaps I'd like to raise that point that Alistair wasn't late to this meeting, not entirely because of his own fault, but because there was a difference in the timing, and it was on the calendars starting at 1 o'clock. That was right, that's why I was here at 1 o'clock. But it may have been in the other information we
In
sent out
the program, it was 1:30.
at 1:30. I think this has happened. I remember Councillor Ludlow, you might have been in this situation once
Yeah,
before.
just the once though, out of 9 years, it's not bad.
It was changed, Mr. Chairman, after
The other ones are my own
the need to have the discussion meeting this morning. There was only one item deferred, and the latest update did have it in, but Alice was obviously relying on the last one put in his diary, and ideally those things should change in their diaries, I would have thought. If it isn't, is there a way we can make sure that
Well,
Mine was a paper diary.
no.
Yes, so it is on your electronic diary. Do you use that, Alistair?
I do, but at this time of the year, you go nowhere near it. You get your program all sorted out, in your diary go, because of the pressures of other things around this world.
the agenda timetable is usually the most reliable, I'd have to say.
Sorry, what was that?
The time on the agendas is usually the most reliable.
Yeah. Either that's a paper version or
Oh.
electronic.
I'll forgive you, Morris, but don't
It's
let
not
it
his
happen
fault,
again.
it's not his fault.
Thank you. And just for the minutes then, if we could record that Alistair was ready to arrive due to a misunderstanding with the time. Right, thank you very much. And
Yeah. Again.